a lot of Chicago Bulls fans, myself included, are kind of ready for the Zach LaVine trade saga to kind of just be over. Not necessarily saying that we want them to trade and take a bad deal, but we're just kind of over the situation that the Bulls currently find themselves in. But the Chicago Bulls do face a difficult decision. And do they bring Zach LaVine back while his trade value is low to try to build that value back up and risk whatever that does to the chemistry in the rotation? Or do they go ahead and trade Zach LaVine while his value may be the lowest that it's ever been, and just to kind of maintain what this team is currently? We're going to talk about that all and more, and what the Bulls could do, what the options ahead of them, right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Sir Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, it's the whole episode, about the situation the Chicago Bulls find themselves in with the Zach LaVine situation. And it's not an enviable position at all. Enviable. I said that wrong, but you know what it is. It's not a position to envy at all that the Chicago Bulls are in. They have to look at this, what the Chicago Bulls have been, and ask themselves, do they bring him back, right, and allow him? Because that timeline, the 3 to 4 week timeline is quickly approaching here with the Chicago Bulls, and they have to find that decision out shortly thereafter the new year turns. But what do they do with Zach LaVine? And so it's not a question that's easy. I know you have Bulls fans that sit on one side that are like, no, do not, by any means necessary, do not bring Zach LaVine back to this team. Maybe have him come off the bench. You don't want to disrupt what the young guys are going. You don't want to disrupt this chemistry. And then you have on the other side of that, Bulls fans that are saying, no, what are you talking about? Zach LaVine still is our best player on this roster right now. He's still better than Coby White. He's better than DeMar DeRozan. No, trade DeMar, keep Zach LaVine, right? You have fans that are on both sides of that, and both sides have their own arguments. But when you look at it, right, it's not as easy of a decision for that for the Chicago Bulls. When you look at the Bulls right now, during the stretch without Zach LaVine, they're averaging 117.9 points per game, which is up almost 12 points per game more than what the Chicago Bulls were scoring over the first 19 games of the season. They also are up 4.9 assists per game at 26.8. We've already talked about where that ranks in the top third of the NBA as far as that. Now, also when you look at it, while LaVine has been out, Coby White has been averaging 24.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists per game, and those numbers are a ridiculous improvement over what Coby White has been before. And those touches theoretically just aren't going to be there for Coby White if whatever you want to look at it, when Zach LaVine comes back. So that's a question that they have to ask during it. Matter of fact, when you look at it, and I'm not saying that he's having the same impact, but those numbers are actually about the same numbers that Derrick Rose had when he won MVP. So you got to think about that. And you got to also look, Coby White's playing ridiculous amount of minutes per game over this stretch as well. And that may be a reason of why you do want to bring Zach back. Let's play Coby less minutes. Let's not risk the chance of injury. Coby White, who's had some major injuries over his career already. So with that said, Coby White, when you look at it right now and the growth that he's had, and not to make it all about Coby White, because Patrick Williams has been increasing, Vooch has played better over this stretch as well, all those things. But when you look at it, you have to look at Coby White, who has been kind of the shining player on this team since Zach LaVine has been out, and the Bulls have to wait. Is risking the momentum of what Coby White has been, is it worth risking that to bring Zach LaVine back to up his trade value? Do we realistically think his trade value is going to increase that much more that it's willing to take the ball out of Coby White's hands so far as well? You also got to look at it. Nikola Vucevic more effective in the pick and roll. And somebody left a comment earlier today in the mailback episode just saying that, well, Zach LaVine is still a better player than Coby White. He's a better scorer, right? But Coby White has been, I would say, a better overall player when you look at defense, pick and roll, things like that. Pick and roll, Nikola Vucevic has been 40% more effective in pick and roll situations, even with his cold shooting nights, with Coby running that. Now, you could still run that with Coby White, but we've seen that before. Zach LaVine, at the end of the day, just isn't necessarily the basketball IQ person that you want to run a lot of your basketball, your offense through Zach LaVine. You want to run him and catch and shoot opportunities, things like that. But then when you also look at Patrick Williams, over the stretch that Zach LaVine has been out, Patrick Williams has averaged 14.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, 1.1 blocks per game, 1 steal per game, and shooting 52% from the field. So it's not as easy as a situation as some Bulls fans would have you believe when it comes down to Zach LaVine. Now, again, that depends on what the Bulls are valuing in this. you have to look at it. Zach LaVine has a usage rate right now of 25%. That means a fourth of the offense goes through Zach LaVine when he is on the basketball court. That is going to take, and that is why you're seeing so many more opportunities. When a fourth of your offense goes away, it's going to open up more opportunities for players that already were in your starting lineup in Patrick Williams and Kobe White, but it's going to open up more opportunities because that percentage has to get spread out amongst everybody. And that really is, when you look at it, it is what it is. But when you look at the trade scenarios with Zach LaVine, right? Recently, the Lakers, 76ers, Kings, Cavaliers, those have been some of the teams that have been mentioned in the spot with Zach LaVine. But we've also heard things like, exactly, there's no trade market right now for Zach LaVine, right? There's not going to be any bidding war or anything like that for Zach LaVine. And so it sits the Chicago Bulls in a situation where they have to ask themselves, and they have to find the answer relatively soon. When it comes down to it, what are you going to do about the Zach LaVine situation? If you're going to trade him January 15th, not bring him back to the roster, that's a decision. If you're not going to trade him and you're going to look at it and say, hey, we're going to bring him back, we're going to try to rehab his trade value a little bit, see if he can get on a run, on a stretch, but then you risk that trade value can get even worse at that point in time. So, listen, I look at it and I go back and forth on it myself. I don't expect anybody to have the answers, and Bulls fans are all over the place on this topic because it is one that doesn't have necessarily a clear-cut answer, as even though some Bulls fans would have you believe that it's as simple as Zach LaVine's the best, you bring him back, period. He offers the best chance. We're a better team with Zach LaVine. You have some fans that are on the opposite side of that spectrum. So the Bulls, where they sit right now, in a time where you're moving towards the new year, we're going through the Christmas holiday season, the Bulls right now got to be asking themselves, can we get some clarity on the Zach LaVine situation? Because as of right now, it's all over the place. And like I told you guys a couple of episodes ago, a special episode when we talked about the Philadelphia 76ers, nobody really knows what's going on with the Zach LaVine trade scenario. Nobody knows. Anybody who's telling you there is, they're done. They don't know. We've heard things like the Bulls are looking for players that can help them win now and maybe a pick down the line. That was from Mike Scotto. We heard then from Darnell Mayberry that the Bulls are actually adverse to taking future draft picks. We don't really know what's going on right now. And so anybody who's telling you that they absolutely know is just trying to sell you on something that they don't fucking know, to be quite honest with you guys. And it comes down to that. But the Bulls are in a tough situation, tougher than what I think a lot of people right now realize what it is with Zach LaVine. I think people kind of think that it's going to be this thing of, well, you just keep Zach. It's that simple. You move him in the offseason. But if this team, this front office is really looking at the development of these young players, the steps, I should say, that these young players have done so far with this, you got to ask yourself, man, is it the best thing right now? You look at the Chicago Bulls. Right now, they were voted as having an 11% chance to win the Eastern Conference. You know what that was before then? It was a damn near a net zero. So it's more, like I said, it just comes down to it's really more difficult than what the Chicago Bulls has. Because look at this. Let's say you do take a deal that's on the table right now where it maybe isn't valuing Zach LaVine's trade value where the team sees it at, but then let's say he goes and shines for that team and you realize, hey, we could have got more, right? Jake Fisher from Yahoo Sports just literally reported yesterday that there is no trade sweepstakes when it comes to Zach LaVine, meaning that the Chicago Bulls don't have a bunch of bidders that they can even play off each other. These rumors that we hear about the Kings, the rumors that we hear about the Lakers, the rumors that we hear about the Toronto Raptors, the Philadelphia 76ers, all that right now just seems like it's writers writing things, and maybe they have heard a little bit. But while he's been linked to those teams, they don't necessarily offer a clear-cut way that we could just say that these teams are bidding against each other, whether the Knicks get involved or not. And, I don't envy, like I keep saying, the spot that the Chicago Bulls are in. The trade deadline is February 8th. As we know, all the league is basically open to be traded by January 15th, which we're a couple of weeks away from, about 2.5-3 weeks away from. And so over that stretch of time, between the January 15th deadline and then a month after that, basically another 3 weeks basically after that, the February 8th deadline, the Chicago Bulls have some tough questions to answer themselves on. Do you bring Zach LaVine back? Do you ship him? Do you just take the best possible deal now? Maybe that value is a little too low. And you could risk selling Zach LaVine for pennies on the dollar, and then you don't get the value back. And then we're looking back at the trade and saying, hey, the Bulls absolutely got cooked in that trade. And so it's like I said, it's easy for us here on this side of things to kind of say the Bulls, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. They should bring him back. They shouldn't bring him back. But it comes down to just a number of variables that the front office and AK and Eversley really have to be asking themselves and be talking to the players. Be not necessarily saying ask the players if they want Zach back or not, but be talking to the players, talking to the coaching staff, to make a decision. Billy Donovan said just a couple of games ago the fact that he does want to see Zach LaVien back. And if Zach LaVien, when he does, he said when Zach LaVien comes back, running more catch and shoot opportunities. So if the Bulls do try to bring Zach LaVien back into this lineup to up his trade value, that may come and mean that the players that we've seen prioritized over the last 12 games go back into a role where they're playing third, fourth fiddle. And what does that mean for the long term of those players and their confidence? That's a question that the front office has to ask. I ain't got to, because I'm right here at Chicago Bulls Central. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.